Okay, so have you ever, like, just laid awake at night wondering what it's all about? You know what I mean? Like, what's the point of it
Oh,
all?
yeah, totally. I've definitely had those nights.
It's like the ultimate question, right? The meaning of life.
Definitely the big one.
And that's what we're diving into today. We're taking a deep dive into how another culture grapples with this very question.
Should be interesting.
We're looking at the German Wikipedia article on Sinn des Lebens.
Zinda That's literally meaning of life for you.
Exactly. And you know what I find interesting?
About that.
This article doesn't mess around. It like dives right into how tricky it is to even define meaning in the first place.
That's so true. It's like, what are we even talking about when we say meaning?
Right. We use all these words, purpose, significance, even just life itself.
But trying to pin down an actual definition for any of them.
It's like trying to grab smoke, you know?
Exactly. And the article really makes you realize that even figuring out what we're looking for is like half the battle.
Totally. Are we talking about some big cosmic plan? Or is it more about like personal fulfillment?
Or maybe it's about the impact we have on the world, our legacy.
And then there's the whole question of like whose definition even matters? Is there even supposed to be one right answer to this whole meaning of life thing?
I mean, if it's different for everyone, does that even make it less meaningful? It's a real head scratcher.
It really is. And yet we keep coming back to it. Why is that? This article points out something kind of amazing.
What's that?
It seems like humans are almost hardwired to search for meaning. It's like in our DNA or something.
That's a really interesting point. And, the article talks about how this need to find meaning often pops up during tough times in our lives.
Yeah.
Like after a loss or a major disappointment.
Oh, absolutely. It's like those moments force us to step back and ask those bigger questions, like, what am I doing with my life?
Exactly. It's like those curveballs life throws at us can actually be catalysts for this whole search for meaning.
So, okay, we're talking about this big search for meaning, this deep human need.
Right.
But what about when we actually confront that possibility, the possibility that there is no inherent meaning? This article doesn't shy away from that at all.
It can be a tough pill to swallow, right?
Oh,
This
yeah.
whole idea of meaninglessness.
It really can. And honestly, the article points out that not everyone's exactly eager to jump into that existential void.
Makes total sense.
Like sometimes it's just easier to avoid the whole question altogether, right? Distract ourselves with whatever's going on.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, think about it. It's way easier to just scroll through social media, binge watch something, whatever, than to actually sit with those big, uncomfortable questions.
Right. Ignorance is bliss and all that. But the article does make you wonder,
Yeah.
if we just avoid thinking about the meaning of life, are we really living a full life?
That's a really good question.
Yeah.
And the article brings up some pretty common reactions to this whole meaninglessness thing.
Yeah.
Like you've got denial, obviously.
Sure.
You've got cynicism, which is always fun.
Not really.
Okay, fair enough. But then there's despair, too.
Mm,
Like a real sense of hopelessness.
that's heavy stuff.
Yeah.
And the article doesn't sugarcoat it. It acknowledges that those are very real responses to this whole thing.
They are. And, it makes you think about those responses, too. Like, is ignorance really bliss if it means we're just burying our heads in the sand?
It's a valid point. But then the article takes this fascinating turn. It introduces us to Viktor Frankl.
Oh, Viktor Frankl.
Yeah.
Now, there's a name that carries some weight.
Right. For anyone who hasn't heard of him, Frankl was a Holocaust survivor.
And his perspective on meaning is, well, it's pretty powerful, to say the least.
It really is. I mean, this is a man who endured unimaginable suffering.
Unimaginable.
And yet he still found meaning. He still believed in it.
He did. And he believed that it wasn't some kind of luxury, some kind of reward for a life well lived. He saw it as a challenge.
A challenge.
Yeah. He believed we are constantly challenged to find meaning, even when life throws its absolute worst at us.
Even in the darkest of places, to quote the man himself.
Exactly. And he had this one quote that really stuck with me. He said, "He who has a why to live can bear almost anyhow."
Wow. I mean, that's
Profound, right?
it really is. It's like he's saying that if you have a strong enough why, a reason for being, a purpose, then you can endure almost any hardship that life throws your way.
Precisely. And that search for why, for meaning, it's something that has captivated thinkers for centuries. And the article takes us on this whirlwind tour of different philosophical perspectives.
It's like a philosophical buffet, right? From
Right.
ancient Greece to modern times.
Exactly. All these brilliant minds wrestling with the same fundamental questions.
And what's amazing is how much they still have to teach us today, even centuries later.
Oh, absolutely. Their insights are timeless. And one figure who really stands out in this whole search for meaning, at least according to the article, is Aristotle.
Aristotle the OG, right?
Pretty much. This wasn't just some guy lounging around in the Athenian sunshine.
So what was he about then? What was his big takeaway on the meaning of life? This guy Aristotle sounds intense.
He was all about knowledge. He believed that true happiness, true fulfillment, that came from really understanding the world around us.
So he was like hitting the books 24/7.
Pretty much. For Aristotle, knowledge wasn't just about memorizing a bunch of facts, though.
So it wasn't just trivia night at the Parthenon.
Not exactly. He saw it as this active process of inquiry, of constantly seeking out new information and then trying to make sense of it all.
Okay, so kind of like what we're doing right now.
Exactly. Except with less Wikipedia and maybe a few more togas.
Right, point taken. So Aristotle's all about that knowledge life. What other perspectives did the article highlight?
Well, it also touches on the Stoics.
The Stoics, weren't they all about, like, keeping a stiff upper lip no matter what?
That's a bit of a simplification. But they did place a lot of emphasis on self-control and accepting what you can't change.
Okay, so less about expanding your mind and more about mastering it.
In a way, yes. For the Stoics, finding meaning wasn't so much about figuring out some grand cosmic plan.
It was more about how you lived your life day to day.
Exactly. They believed in living in harmony with nature, both the natural world and your own human nature.
Interesting. So we've got knowledge with Aristotle, self-mastery with the Stoics. It's like a whole philosophical toolbox for finding meaning.
Right. And then along comes Nietzsche, and he kind of throws a wrench in the whole thing.
Nietzsche. That name always brings up some strong opinions.
For good reason. Nietzsche was a real game changer. He's famous for declaring, God is dead.
Yeah, that's not exactly a subtle statement.
Not at all.
Hmm.
And what he meant by that was that the old structures of meaning, the ones that people had relied on for centuries, things like traditional religion, they were crumbling.
Okay, so if the old ways of finding meaning were gone, what did Nietzsche offer in their place?
Well, he put the responsibility squarely on our shoulders. He believed that it's up to each of us as individuals to create our own meaning.
Wow, talk about a lot of pressure. So it's like, no more instruction manual, you're on your own.
That's one way to put it.
Yeah.
But it's also incredibly empowering, don't you think?
I mean, it's definitely a lot to think about. It reminds me of that feeling after you finish a big project, you know? Like, there's a sense of accomplishment, but also this, okay, what now?
Exactly. And I think that's what Nietzsche was getting at. Life doesn't hand you a prepackaged meaning. You have to go out and create it for yourself.
Find your own adventure. Write your own story. That's pretty powerful stuff. And it's amazing how this article brings together all these different perspectives, from ancient philosophers to modern-day pop culture.
It's a good reminder that this question of life's meaning, it's something that has resonated with people across cultures and throughout history.
Absolutely. And it's not just about philosophy and religion either. This article touches on how humor plays a role, too.
Right, like the answer 42 from The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
It's the ultimate non-answer, but it also kind of makes you think, you know?
Exactly. Maybe the meaning of life isn't some profound singular truth.
Maybe it's more about the journey, the questioning, the never-ending search for answers.
That's a beautiful thought. And ultimately, it's a question that each of us has to answer for ourselves.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I'm curious what stuck with you. What resonated most in your own personal search for meaning?
What really struck me is just how this question connects us all. No matter our background, our beliefs, our experiences, we're all united by this shared desire to find meaning in the world around us.
It's a powerful reminder that we're not alone in this journey. And who knows, maybe someday you'll add your own unique voice to this ever-evolving conversation on the meaning of life.
Now, wouldn't that be something?
It really would. Until then, keep those big questions coming and we'll keep exploring them together right here on The Deep Dive.